This is Soul Chronicles, and I'm your host, C. Boyd Motley. This one's going to be a little challenging to discuss because of the fact that it's so personal. I want to talk about the collateral damage that more often than not comes while dealing with divorce. As I've mentioned before, I was divorced twice, one child from each marriage. And in both occasions, after the divorce, I was estranged from my children. And at first, I could admit now, with hindsight being what it is, that I approached the situation from a very selfish mindset, in that I felt at those times that I hadn't done anything wrong. So I felt a way about being estranged. I felt a way about my kids had being in their feelings, which goes to show just how immature I was at the time. And I took a very, I guess, petty perspective from it and chose to just say, you know what? I'm going to fall back, let them figure it out, and not even try to communicate, not even try to connect, because I felt like it was the mom's fault. The mom was influencing negatively or saying whatever. So I hung my hat on that bitter mom syndrome. Now, fast forward to today where, my oldest daughter and I are in contact now more than we were then and having a great relationship as of late. My youngest still not on the not still estranged, but I have hopes that one day that'll change. I still reach out on occasion. I don't do it a lot, which I think a lot of folks will say is counterintuitive, but I've learned and I feel like in when it comes to divorce, you have to be respectful of the child's perspective. They may not have a clear understanding as to all the ins and outs and nuances behind the scenes, but they are going to have their own feelings and how they interpret what they see, felt, and hear. I think as parents, we have a tendency of dismissing that fact and focusing on the issues that were between them and their spouse, or them and their significant other, or them and their baby or dad, baby mama, baby daddy, however you want to word it, rather than putting the focus on where it needs to be, which is on the child. Now, in order to achieve that level of focus, it requires also a level of maturity on both parts to ensure that the child's best interests are put first above feelings and emotions and resentment and the like. And I feel it's important that for any estranged fathers that are out there, because I can only speak to estranged fathers or, estranged parents in general, but I focus more on the fathers because I'm a man. I feel like oftentimes we look at the court systems and we get angry with everything and saying that, the courts are against us, blah, blah, blah. And they always support, look, we have to be careful with those words because while, yes, the court systems do have a tendency of leaning towards the mother because it's just the way the system is built, by focusing on that, it removes the accountability that we have as the parent because you can put it on the shoulders of the judge or the state or the mother. Again, not saying that those individuals, those parts don't play a factor in the overall scope of the situation, but I think it's easy to get caught up in shifting the focus away from our own faults, our own mistakes. And doing that closes us off to when the day comes and our children reach out to us that we're already on the defensive. It sets us up to be that person that's defensive. Oh, you gotta understand that I did this, I did that, did the other, and your mother this, your mother that, judge this, court that, rather than just saying, "Baby, I'm sorry. At the time all this happened, I was not mature. I made mistakes. I said things I shouldn't have said, done things I shouldn't have done. And I regret those things, but I can't change them. And I'm sorry that the way that for how that's made you feel, but I believe in my heart that we can go forward." Those words will resonate more than you trying to pass the buck onto somebody else. And I think remembering that is important because I have to remind myself that every day. Because there are days, I'm not going to lie, that I get frustrated with our lack of communication and I get into my feelings and I decide I want to start blaming her mother for being the reason. When in fact, the situation is as is because I put myself in this predicament. I had a hand in this. I wasn't mature. I wasn't present. There's a number of things that did not go right, but I made those choices at the time thinking that that was the best move at the time. And it's my fault for not knowing better, but I should have known better. But going forward is what I focus on now. How do I move going forward? So circling back to what I kind of got off on a tangent there, and I apologize, but my point in bringing that up is that I had to learn to give my children space because by trying to force myself into their lives was only pushing me further away. And a hard lesson I learned a few years ago was that just because you're ready to be forgiven doesn't mean that the person who is needs to who you want to forgive you is ready. Just because you're ready to move past the past doesn't mean that they are in that same position. And you have to be respectful of that. At the time these things occurred, my daughters were young, very impressionable, didn't understand how the world works. So for them, it felt a certain kind of way. And as a parent who's never, as a person who's never been through a divorce, I cannot relate to the pain and the hurt feelings that my daughters felt or feel. The only thing that I try to do whenever I talk to my oldest, anyway, currently, is I try to be empathetic. I focus on listening to what she's saying, not taking things to personal, being offended by anything she's saying, but recognizing that these are her feelings and they need to be validated. Because when you hurt people, you have to take accountability for what you've done wrong. Trying to run from accountability is what keeps the gap, widens the gap, keeps the distance. And we got to stop doing that. You got to just, you know, own the fact that you made mistakes and be okay with it. And I'm not saying okay like nonchalant. I mean, meaning that you're going to make mistakes. Children aren't going to understand that in the moments that they happen or in that moment, but you have to be respectful of their wishes and do your best to give them space and opportunity to come back into the fold. And trying to force that, as I said a minute ago, can only push things, make things further away or harder to achieve. So when the time does come and you are able to reunite with your child and you spend time with them, because I believe it will come, then there's another level of dealing with any animosity they feel being with you, being in your presence, especially if you've not been around for a while. You're going to see some lashing out. You're going to see some temper tantrums. You're going to see some anger manifesting itself physically. I'm not saying you should tolerate disrespect, but at the same time, you have to, before you immediately go to a knee jerk reaction, just kind of remember and realize again that this child's hurting and they don't know how to express that necessarily properly. So, this is the way they express it through tantrums, lashing out, and whatnot. I think it's important that if you want the relationship to grow with them, that you approach it from an adult perspective. Don't come down to their level and get into a shouting match. You need to remain high and like, you know what? I understand you feel the way you feel, but your reaction is not acceptable. The way you're reacting right now, the way you're doing, how you're talking to me is not acceptable. I need you to check that. You still are their parent. Are they going to push back and fight? Of course. But when you resort to their level of emotion and respond in that way, you're not going to get anywhere you want to get to with them because then it's going to become a shouting match all the time. And all they're going to walk away from it with is, see, you're the same. You're still this person. You're still this person. You're still this person that causes pain, anger. You don't want to be in that category anymore if you can help it. But the reason we get caught up in those emotional moments and those emotional arguments is because we make it about us when in reality it's about the child and understanding how they feel in those moments and how best to care for them. Now, I know this is a little bit off the beaten path of what I normally post for these podcasts, but I just felt like I needed to share that because I'm sure there are other estranged fathers out there that are struggling with things. And again, like I said in the beginning, I'm not saying that other factors don't play a role in the situation. My goal with this podcast, my message for today is to make sure that you minimize, if not eliminate yourself from being part of that problem. Do the best you can with what you know, keep the emotion out of it, stay confident in your ability to be the parent and do the best you can. This is Soul Chronicles.